Tag TV and Tag Radio be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Just how will Georgia's science and technology community be impacted by the state's government General Assembly in 2012? Will they address the big issues challenging the very core of what is being done to ensure our state's technology environment? What about STEM education, incentives for innovation and economic development? How will Georgia's technology global marketplace be impacted by the actions or non-action of the Assembly on economic growth and on world-class competitiveness? Wait a minute. With the conclusion of the Science and Technology Study Commission, what can we expect to see as some of the biggest outcomes? And oh yes, will tax reform be a topic of discussion? Greetings, everyone. It's Thursday, January 12, 2012, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. He was first elected to the Georgia Senate in 2010, representing the 56th District, a rapidly growing, long-established, and expanding center of national technology leading companies, Georgia-based successful entrepreneur technology companies, and startups, an area in North Fulton that spans across Alpharetta, Roswell, and Mountain Park. He serves as Vice Chairman of the Public Safety and Science and Technology Committee, as well as Deputy Whip. He is also a member of the Economic Development, Education, and Youth and Ethics Committees. He is Senator John Albers, a longtime respected and dedicated community leader, fourth-generation firefighter, serving as a volunteer in Alpharetta, a National Republican Party leader, serving on the party's National Committee Business Advisory Council and State, National, and North Fulton Republican Party organizations. Most important to the technology community of Georgia, Senator Albers is a passionate advocate and unique visionary elected official for growth and competitive advancement of our technology global marketplace, now and in the future. An executive and business owner, family man, and community civic leader, community volunteer, and a Georgia technology evangelist. Up to the Tech Talk, we proudly welcome State Senator John Albers. Mr. Senator, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thank you, Frank, for having me on the show today. I appreciate it.
Challenging days. Obviously, your first couple of years have been extremely busy, lots of responsibilities that you're taking on, a lot of great actions and activities that I know a lot of our listeners are already aware of. But now the challenge, once again, is to see an assembly where you've got to do more with less, and that's always the biggest challenge. What should our listeners expect to see to come out of the General Assembly in 2012? You know, for example, will tax reform obviously be a topic of discussion?
Well, Frank, good questions. We have a lot on our agenda. You know, first and foremost, we're constitutionally mandated to pass a balanced budget, which we do in Georgia every year, and unlike our friends up in Washington, we do have a balanced budget and no deficit, so I'm real proud about that. Recently, I was named Vice Chairman of the Finance Committee, so I will be intimately involved in tax reform. How much we do on tax reform is still to be determined, but it is my goal specifically to accomplish two major tasks. The first one is to remove the tax on energy, which powers our data centers, our factories, mills, from traditional to high-tech industry. All are affected by the tax on energy. And the fundamental principle of tax is you tax outputs and not inputs, and we do want to correct that as soon as possible. And the second part is to move us away from our current income, capital gains, and corporate tax structure to a consumption-based or fair tax model.
Now, for any of our listeners, they know that you're Vice Chair of the Science and Technology Committee. Once again, I guess let's kind of mine down on that a little bit. We've got a technology audience with us today. What should the community expect? What's the impact this year's activity is going to happen in the legislature?
Well, as being a technologist myself and serving as a client partner for Slalom Consulting right here in town, I was intimately involved in helping to co-sponsor and craft the legislation for what was Senate Resolution 68 to create a statewide Science and Technology Commission to lure more high-tech jobs into Georgia. I know many of those listeners today will be aware that while we have a 9.9% unemployment rate, we have, per our Technology Association of Georgia, reporting of almost 5,400 open technology jobs. So we want to continue to increase that. We want to have the education in place to provide those folks, and we want to have the incentives and the environment set up properly to attract more high-tech jobs. And that's from the largest of the Fortune 50 companies, Frank, all the way down to the startups who are going through angel and venture capitalist funding and everybody in between.
Tell us a little bit more about that. Maybe go into a little detail. I think a lot of our listeners are aware of it, but probably not so much the details. Does it really span all the way from the K through 12 STEM initiative all the way through to economic development and recruitment?
Boy, it sure does. You know, having a focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, and getting those kids excited about what that means in the future and getting those foundational skills in place are so important. We know that we're not necessarily competing against Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. We're competing against the global economy, and we do not have the skills necessary just to fill our open jobs, no less the jobs that will continually be created within the STEM protocol. We need folks to be graduating from high school with some certifications and basic skills to do what I've coined gray-collar jobs, which are the jobs that would be more focused around basic network administration, report writing, first-level software development, and things of that nature, as well as working in labs and other fields within science, that will be perhaps prepared to take those jobs on, and then that follows into the technical school curriculum and certainly into our traditional colleges and universities for those who will be getting associates, bachelor's, and advanced college degrees. But we can't have folks graduating or getting out of school today that aren't ready to hit the job market.
You know, one of the things that we often talk about is individual branding. You know, it's not about jobs anymore. It's about work. It's going to be a case where every individual is going to be its own enterprise, if you will, in terms of getting work. And obviously, when you think in terms of 5,000-plus opportunities, high-paying opportunities that are sitting out there unfilled simply because we don't have the kind of qualified skilled labor force here already, is, I think, sort of a two-sided coin, because on one side, great opportunities for people to earn a living, but the other side of it is, how do we remain competitive on a global basis if we don't have this kind of intellectual currency at our beck and call?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really a multi-pronged approach when you think about where we are today and what we have to have the needs for the short term, which is to increase employment. I know my top three priorities this legislative session are jobs, jobs, and jobs.
Amen.
And we need to do that just as quickly as possible, and at the same time lay the foundation for what will be the future over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So each of those have to work together in order to make this successful. High-tech jobs are critical to our area. You know, the Metro Atlanta area in the state of Georgia have long been known as being a high-tech area, especially for the southeast. Over time, other cities and other states have begun to try to steal that mantle from us, and it's time that we grounded ourselves in being that place that people want to come. They want to go to school here. They want to move their business here. They want to grow their business here. They want to move their families here. And that will take a lot of work from all of us, and government is one of those key components, and certainly working with each one of us who are in the technology industry today will be a part of that solution.
Science and Technology Study Commission, when it concludes, what do you think will be some of the biggest outcomes?
Well, we actually are working on our finalized report literally as we speak here. I've got a draft copy on my laptop that I am editing, and I believe there'll be many different pieces of it. One part, I was honored to chair a subcommittee that focused specifically on venture capitalists and angel investment, and got to work with a wonderful group of folks who are really the real players and in town, Sig Mosley and Alan Knox and Michael Price, and some of the folks who have really helped pioneer and lay the foundation for a lot of the work that's being done today and has been done in the past in the Atlanta metro area. Georgia. And their wisdom helped us collectively come up with a series of recommendations, both short-term and long-term, that are going to help be able to infuse capital and entrepreneurship to really get those small companies that are coming out of the ground, those that are making the next step maybe into VC funding, as well as those mid-sized companies, which I'm talking to a few right now, who are at that $200-300 million range, who are on a trajectory over the next 4 to 5 years to hit $1 billion. That will involve a lot of capital to make that happen, and we want to make sure that all that growth happens here for Georgia. I want Georgia jobs and Georgia revenue.
One of the things that, again, our community knows and understands because we live it every day is the fact that there are places where Georgia leads now in technology. I know the Technology Association has identified, I think, 7 different verticals, things like health IT and fintech and logistics and security, many of which are, as we pointed out with the job opportunities, are growing, not just here in the United States, but globally. They're global leaders and have impacted, they use the term disruptive technology. Some of the things that have come out of, when you mention Sig Mosley, you also think in terms of the Technology Hall of Fame and the kind of leaders and innovators that have come out of Georgia, out of Atlanta, literally for decades, that have impacted, disrupted what we now call the technology community or IT community on a global basis. When you talk about the outcomes, venture capital has always been a stickler. I know I've talked to Sid many times myself over the years. The frustration of why haven't we really been able to break through? I think, it's a case where during the dot bubble, certainly there was a tremendous expansion in the VC marketplace. But is there something that you can share with us that you're discovering out of that study that really is kind of highlighting not so much a weakness, but an opportunity for us to really make some either mental changes or literally financial or physical changes?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'll highlight 2 of them, and when we follow up on your other point about what we're being known for, we're also known as the data center capital of the Southeast as well. Very proud about certainly all of our co-location providers we have in town, as well as just those large companies, mid-size and small, that moved their data centers here. And that's a combination of our low cost of energy, and when we can couple with that the reduction and removal of the tax energy, that will be one more reason to get more business. But two specific areas that we're going to be focusing on, one short term and one longer term. The first one is to create a state investment fund that will allow us to look at what will be future tax credits that can be used now and put into a fund and managed locally that will help use for alternative investments into startup businesses that will be only located in Georgia. And then those financial institutions that want to participate in that fund will also have to have a full-time presence in Georgia as well. And you may say, well, John, why is that important to us? And the reason is today we have some investors that come in and out of town that may come in from Silicon Valley or New York or Boston who may spend a day, 2 days a week, or even a month. But they're not really ingrained in our community. They've made a strategic investment, and usually when that investment begins to take off, they want to move them to their locale and their cities. Having a full-time person here saying that these jobs have to be in Georgia, they can't be moved, and you have to have a full-time presence and office here, will make them a part of our community, which will make them want to keep that business here, but also invest additional dollars into other Georgia companies. And we know once we get them here, they will quickly realize all the wonderful opportunities that Georgia and Metro Atlanta has to offer them. And the second issue that we're going to focus on is we're one of the only states that doesn't allow alternative investments in our pension funds. I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that Georgia has some of the best finances of all 50 states, and something we should all be very proud of. And we have fully funded pension systems. But today, we do not allow them to invest a very small portion of that money into what's called alternative investments, which are investing in companies outside of the traditional stock market and bonds. And as we all know, the stock market and mutual fund market isn't as predictable as it used to be in the last few years. And we know that the return on investment is great, and it could infuse huge amounts of capital into our economy, and again, mandate all those happen here in Georgia. And that's what I'm most excited for. I want the jobs to be in Georgia, whether it be Columbus, Augusta, Savannah, Gainesville, Atlanta, Roswell, Alpharetta, you name it. We want those jobs here.
It's layers and tentacles. I mean, there's so many things that one thing affects another in one way or another. I guess where I'm headed is when you talk about inbound investment, economic development, I would think it kind of goes back to the old sales adage that the way you get things done is either by incentive or by punishment. Is it a case like the tax credit with the entertainment business? Do you see the VCs being incentivized to keep those businesses here locally? The challenge of these, borderless companies against bordered governments, how do you deal with that as far as the future of economic development and inbound investment is concerned?
Right. Well, certainly the entertainment tax credit has been hugely successful with bringing television shows and movie productions here to the state, and we can apply some of that same logic in many other areas. Certainly in the technology and science arena, we need to update the ability of how we can incent and offer programs to bring those businesses here to get those jobs, which will then provide a myriad of revenue that helps all in the state. But also we need to look at broadly again in full tax reform, moving to a consumption-based tax model in general, very similar to the way that Texas, Tennessee, and Florida have set up, will be very powerful. And if you can imagine, Frank, with me, is looking at a Wall Street Journal that says the state of Georgia reduces its income tax and its corporate tax by 25%, and then eventually 50%, and in the not-so-distant future, 100%.
That sounds like an incentive to me.
That is a job creator.
Really. Well, and not to put you on the spot when I talk about inbound investment and the challenges, because I think, a lot of us who have gone through the bubble and gone through some of the early investment cycles know that initially there was a parochial kind of an attitude that said if you're going to invest in a company here, that company needed to stay here. Now it's a case where when I mention layers and tentacles, things like infrastructure, things like the data centers that you were talking about, things like our fiber optics and those kind of capabilities, they kind of all interplay with the fact that that company can be located here not just because we love Georgia, yes we do, but because this happens to be a great place to live, high quality of life, good opportunities and tax incentives and other things that you're talking about. That's going to keep that business here as much as mandating it, if you will, from a VC standpoint.
You're absolutely right. In fact, I have been working with some of my good friends, Mayor Belle Isle up in the city of Alpharetta, which has really become a technology city, if you will. Lots of high-tech companies have moved there. The access to fiber optics and broadband has surged, not just the data centers, but the high-tech companies in general. And when you begin that process, more want to be a part of that. And they're really coming up with some great innovative programs of bringing those people together more. And I think the more you see that, we thrive off of each other. If you look at the model that was done in Silicon Valley, you can see how that has evolved over time. And my goal here is to create Peachtree Valley.
Well, I think, if one of the things is a sense of identity and a sense of place. We have a Technology Hall of Fame. I mentioned it briefly when we were talking about Sid Mosley and John Imlay and so many others that are legend in terms of the early days of technology and early days of IT, early days of financial software like Peachtree, that really are the root to a lot of the businesses that are now growing today, of fintechs, and a lot of those situations kind of migrated out of those original entrepreneurs. The reason I even bring that up is to say that I think everybody talks about the next great crossroads or the next great gateway or the new tech city, whether it's domestically or really globally. And I'm sure you're aware from a global standpoint, the UK just announced Digital City or something, and I think it kind of pops up all the time. The real key to it is that what you've got in Alpharetta, what you've got in that greater hub, are people who, as I mentioned earlier, have been disruptive players in impacting technology. It's not only a great, branding concept. It's real. It's don't dream it, be it. And I think Alpharetta certainly is doing just that. Let's talk a little bit about how you feel in what's being done to ensure Georgia's tech environment grows and stays competitive, not only the greater metropolitan Atlanta, but the overall market, the overall state, and as it relates to the global marketplace.
I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the other key initiatives that will come out of Senate Resolution 68 that focuses on other areas of state specifically are the ability to onshore jobs. If you look at the way the dollar has been very low in comparison to other foreign currencies, and the emerging middle classes in places like China and India and Indonesia and the Philippines, et cetera, where traditional outsourcing has happened over the last 15 years or so, those lines are starting to intersect. In fact, I'm working with a few very large companies right here in Metro Atlanta about maybe 2014, the latest 2015, where those lines intersect of not only not moving those jobs over anymore in cases, but bringing them back. And bringing them back in some cases in our not largest metropolitan areas, but the Columbus, Savannah, Macon, Augusta, Gainesville, those smaller cities that can provide a good educational backbone, have the broadband available where folks can get into these jobs, very similar to the way NCR moved some jobs back to Columbus a year ago. And we want to see more of that. But to do that, Georgia's got to have the environment set up, the marketing in place, the people ready to go, and everything attracting the incentives to migrate those jobs back home. And if you look at the very large group of Fortune 500 companies that we are home to today or have large regional headquarters to, we are an ideal location to bring those jobs back based on our cost of living, our tax structure, and other things. So that's one way that I'll be working with this group of people to bring those back home, as well as, again, iron sharpens iron. The more of these folks we bring in, the better we'll do with luring other technology folks here. Well,
I think that's inherent. I think that's part of what you see in Alpharetta in terms of the cluster of a diverse group of technologies, but still having, I've often said to some of my clients that technology doesn't really know content, so it really doesn't make it, in a way, it doesn't make a difference if it's fintech or if it's health IT. If you're dealing with programming or you're dealing with software or you're dealing with some kind of innovation in either one of those fields or any of the others, it helps to have the kind of community supporting you with the kind of people and human resources, and even for that matter, other service providers that can help enhance. When you mention Columbus, everybody's got to be thinking financial. When you think of Savannah, you got to be thinking logistics. When you're thinking Augusta, you got to be thinking healthcare. You've already got a foothold in many of those cities that are going to, I think, bode well in terms of that strategy that you're discussing.
Well, you're absolutely right, and these jobs also give people a career path if they're going to move and live in Georgia, that they can move over time. The days of working at that job for 30 years to retirement are simply not there anymore for lots of reasons. But, even in my firm, Slalom Consulting, we have folks that have come to us from some of these wonderful companies, and some that over time will go back into other companies or other areas. But having that runway and those opportunities keeps people here, makes them more innovative, and really, again, puts us on that leading edge.
One of the things that I think from I guess just a psychological standpoint, we have a tendency to think anything outside of Metro Atlanta is a small city and is rural, when in reality, like we're talking about, some of these cities outside of the area have ecosystems that have been highly successful and are rich in terms of depth and breadth of their capabilities. One area I would love to touch on before we let you go, and that is the North Georgia network and that whole fiber optic that's opening up the 14 counties of that region. I feel like, in my personal opinion, that's going to be a boom in the long run, obviously from a connectivity standpoint, but when you match that kind of quality of life, the low cost of living with an infrastructure that will allow for high-speed connectivity, would seem like that's a pretty interesting formula for success.
Frank, it absolutely is. That type of an investment will pay off, pay huge dividends in the future. And if you look at the way things are moving through, cloud computing, I always use the analogy. If you remember back in the late 80s and very early 90s, IBM told all of us we were going to go to a mainframe. And then, Bill Gates of Microsoft said, well, we're all crazy. Everybody's going to a PC. Well, if you look at where we are technologically right now, going to things in the, quote, cloud, it's the mainframe, the cloud, whatever you want to call it. But the need for high-density bandwidth, whether you are running your business out of it, your data center, or your home, all is going to require that huge amount of bandwidth. And what we're talking about now with small pipes, I'll call them, even having a 5 or 10 meg download at your house, will be gig and 10 gig speed before we know it. And having that fiber in place will be a huge benefit to the North Georgia network.
What an exciting time. I know that one thing I'll mention that I think I'm very respectful for, I think you're a fourth-generation firefighter. That bodes well of someone who cares about their neighbors and gives to their community and has for generations upon generations, and hats off to you on that. I know just in the last couple of years, you probably don't want to hear this, but the reality of it is you're really making a lot of headway and getting a lot of people paying attention to the things you talk about, but not only talk about, end up doing. And I think it's long past time to have somebody that not only talks the talk but actually walks the walk. And we're proud to have you as our representative. And we look forward to this session and look forward to supporting you and your efforts as far as the future is concerned, economic development all breath-wise, but certainly in the areas of science and technology. Mr. Senator, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today on Tech Talk.
Well, Frank, thank you so much, and I would love to hear from all the listeners. Please contact me at senatoralbers.com. I would love to chat with you, email with you, or have you come down and visit us right here at the Capitol so we can talk shop, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Take care.